Leviticus chapter 13. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, If any man should have in the skin of his flesh a discoloration, radiant spot, and an infection of leprosy takes place in the skin of his flesh, he shall be led to Aaron the priest, or one of his sons of the priests, and the priest shall look at the infection in the skin of his flesh. And if a hair in the infection should turn white, and the appearance of the infection be deep under the skin of his flesh, it is an infection of leprosy, and the priest shall look and shall declare him defiled. And if the radiant spot should be white in the skin of his flesh, and its appearance should not be deep below the skin, and its hair did not turn white, but it is faint, then the priest shall separate the infection for 7 days. And the priest shall look at the infection on the 7th day. And behold, if the infection abides before him, and if the infection did not degenerate in the skin, then the priest shall separate him 7 days the second time. And the priest shall look at him on the 7th day the second time, and behold, if the infection is faint, and the infection did not degenerate in the skin, then the priest will cleanse him, for it is a spot, and washing his garments he will be clean. But if in turning the spot degenerates in the skin, after the priest looking at him to cleanse him, then he shall appear the second time to the priest, and the priest shall look at him, and behold, if the spot degenerated in the skin, then the priest shall declare him defiled, it is leprosy. And if an infection of leprosy happens in a man, then he shall come to the priest, and the priest shall look, and behold, if it is a white discoloration in the skin, and if it turn the hair white, and some of the healthy flesh be living in the discoloration, it is a leprosy becoming old in the skin of his flesh, and the priest shall declare him defiled, and shall separate him, for he is unclean. But if blooming leprosy shall break out in the skin, and the leprosy shall cover all the skin with the infection from head unto his feet, according to the whole vision of the priest, then the priest shall look, and behold, if the leprosy covers all the skin of his flesh, then he shall cleanse the infection, for all turned white, he is clean. And in whatever day living flesh should appear to him, he shall be declared defiled. And the priest shall look at the healthy flesh, and the healthy flesh shall prove him defiled, for it is unclean, it is leprosy. But if the healthy flesh should restore and turn white, then he shall come to the priest, and the priest shall see him, and behold, if the infection turned to the white, then the priest shall declare him cleansed by the infection, he is clean. And if flesh should have a lesion in its skin, and should heal, and there should become in the place of the lesion a white discoloration, or radiant spot being whitened, or being reddish, and it should be looked at by the priest, then the priest shall look, and behold, if the appearance be deeper under the skin, and its hair turns into white, then the priest shall declare him defiled, for it is leprosy, it broke out in the lesion. But if the priest should look at him, and behold, there is not a white hair on it, and it should not be deep under the skin of his flesh, and it should be faint, then the priest shall separate him 7 days. But if in a diffusion it should have diffused in the skin, then the priest shall declare him defiled. It is an infection of leprosy, it broke out in the lesion. And if in its place the radiance should abide, and should not diffuse, it is a discoloration of the lesion, and the priest shall cleanse him. And if flesh should become a fiery inflammation in his skin, and there should be in his skin the healing of the inflammation, shining forth radiant white, becoming somewhat reddish or very white, then the priest shall look at him, and behold, if the hair is turned white in the shining forth, and the appearance of it is deep under the skin, it is leprosy, it broke out in the inflammation. And the priest shall declare him defiled, it is an infection of leprosy. But if the priest should look at him, and behold, there is not in the shining forth a white hair, and it should not be deep under the skin, but it is faint, then the priest shall separate him 7 days, and the priest shall look at him in the 7th day. But if the diffusion should diffuse in the skin, then the priest shall declare him defiled. It is an infection of leprosy. It broke out in the lesion. But if the shining forth should stay in its place and should not be diffused in the skin, but it should be faint, it is a discoloration of an inflammation, and the priest should declare him cleansed, for it is an effect of an inflammation. And a man or a woman in whomever has in themselves an infection of leprosy in the head or in the beard, then the priest shall look at the infection. And behold, if its appearance be embedded under the skin, and in it a yellowish thin hair, then the priest shall declare him defiled. It is an outbreak. It is a leprosy of the head or a leprosy of the beard. And if the priest should look at the infection of the outbreak, and behold, the appearance is not embedded under the skin, and the hair is not yellowish in it, then the priest shall separate the infection of the outbreak 7 days. And the priest shall look at the infection on the 7th day. And behold, if the outbreak should not be diffused, and there is not a yellowish hair in it, and the appearance of the outbreak is not hollow under the skin, then the skin shall be shaven, but the outbreak shall not be shaven. And the priest shall separate the outbreak 7 days for the 2nd time. And the priest shall look at the outbreak on the 7th day, and behold, if the outbreak should not be diffused in the skin after the shaving of it, and the appearance of the outbreak is not hollow under the skin, then the priest shall cleanse him, and washing his garments he will be clean. But if the diffusion should be diffused in the outbreak in the skin after cleansing it, then the priest shall look at him, and behold, if the outbreak should be diffused in the skin, the priest shall not examine concerning the hair being yellowish, he is unclean. But if before him the outbreak should abide in its place, and a black hair should rise in it, the outbreak is healed, he is clean, and the priest shall declare him cleansed. And a man or woman in whomever should have in the skin of his flesh shinings shining forth being white, then the priest shall look, and behold, in the skin of his flesh shinings shining forth being white, it is a psoriasis. It broke out in the skin, he is clean. And if any one should be loose of hair, his head is bald, he is clean. But if his head is loose of hair by his face, he is forehead bald, he is clean. But if there becomes in his baldness, or in his being forehead bald, a white infection or reddening, it is leprosy blossoming in his baldness, or in his forehead baldness, and the priest shall look at it. And behold, if the appearance of the infection be white or reddish in his baldness, or in his forehead bald, as the form of leprosy in the skin of his flesh, he is a leprous man, he is unclean. In defilement the priest shall declare him defiled. In his head is his infection. And the leper in whom is the infection, his garment shall be disabled, and his head uncovered. And concerning his mouth, let him put something around it. And he shall call himself unclean all the days, as many as the infection might be upon him, being unclean. He shall be unclean. Being separated, he shall sit down outside of his camp. It will be to him a place for pastime. And a garment, whichever should have in it an infection of leprosy, in a woolen garment, or in a garment made of hemp, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in the flaxen linens, or in the woolen threads, or in a skin, or in any worked skin, and the infection should become greenish or reddish in the skin, or in the garment, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in any item in worked skin, it is an infection of leprosy, and he shall show it to the priest. And the priest shall look at the infection, And the priest shall separate the infection of 7 days, and he shall look at the infection on the 7th day. But if the infection should diffuse in the garment, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in the skin, according to all as much as might be made with the skins in the work, it is permanent leprosy. It is an unclean infection. He shall incinerate the garment, or the warp, or the woof, which is in the woolen garments, or in the flaxen linens, or in every item made of skin, in whichever there might be in it the infection, for it is a permanent leprosy. By fire it shall be incinerated. But if the priest should look, and the infection should not be diffused in the garment, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in any item made of skin, then the priest shall order, and one shall wash that upon whichever there might be an infection upon it. And the priest shall separate the infection 7 days for the second time. And the priest shall look after the washing the infection. And if thus the infection in no way should turn of its appearance, and the infection did not diffuse, it is unclean. In fire you shall incinerate it. It is fixed firm in the garment, or in the warp, or in the woof. And if the priest should look, and the infection should be faint after the washing it, then he shall rip it from the garment, or from the warp, or from the woof, or from the skin. And if it should appear still in the garment, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in any item made of skin, it is leprosy breaking out. By fire you shall incinerate that which the infection is in. And the garment, or the warp, or the woof, or any item made of skin, which shall be washed, and the infection leaves from it, then it shall be washed the second time, and it shall be clean. This is the law of an infection of leprosy of a garment of wool, or made of hemp, or warp, or woof, or any item made of skin, in the declaring it cleansed or defiled.